Feman nagwinay zaku bao motoy za tiu falingo unsen mija sulugi putiu nasunangit asutase janggini seno mahagwaiza Tubistiti gunangit Kientalota Sangwai jaju Jangwai jaho Neni tudoi tempo Antes de kamu I find this bigas na namo sa ife manang Winay zaku bamotay sa tifahagi Zaife man nagwinay zaku bao motay za tiu falingo unsen miza sulugi putiu nasulangit asutase janggini seno mahagwaiza Tubistiti gunangit Kientalota Sangwai jajum Jagwai jaho Neni tudoi tempo Antes di kamu I found this bigas na namu sa ife manang Winay zaku bamotay za tiu fahaling Sa ife manang Winay zaku bamotay za tiu fahaling Sa ife manang Winay jaku bay motay za tiu fahalingo sa ife manang.
Hafade. Todo Samjo. Welcome to a very special edition of Faisen I Guam Museum. While I host Midzo para Esti, I am once again the host. My name is Inanusi Lujan Bevacqua, Guam Curator I Guam Museum. My name is Lujan Bevacqua. I am the curator at the Guam Museum. And I do have to apologize. Last month was CHamoru here at the Guam Museum, and we are opening up more than ever. We're having more activities, more events, more people coming down, and so CHamoru was our busiest month in a long time. So I did not have time to host a CHamoru Faisen I Guam Museum. So we are having a very special one right now, focused on CHamoru music. So many of you have asked for this in the past, and so today's Faisen I Guam Museum focuses a lot on CHamoru music. All right, and I do want to let everyone know that this is a test stream. Today we are streaming not just to Facebook as usual, but we are also streaming to YouTube, and we're trying it out on Twitter. So hopefully everything is going okay with the live stream and everything is going good. I'm monitoring it, and it seems like it's going okay, but if there's any issues, be sure to let me know in the comments or send me a message to let me know if something isn't working. Just a reminder that the Guam Museum is currently open. We were closed, of course, for the pandemic for a year, but since last year, 2021, we have been reopening, and now our hours are 10 to 2 p.m. If you show up at 9, though, I think we'll still let you in. You no longer need proof of vaccination. Contact tracing info is no longer required, but you may need to submit for a temperature check, and at least until there's any change in the executive order, don't forget to wear your mask. But Mes CHamoru is over. So many of you came down to the Guam Museum. We look forward to having you come again. You don't have to only come in Mes CHamoru. Remember, as I hear some people say, Kada diha Mes CHamoru. Every day is CHamoru month. We put it out, we really highly promoted it this Mes CHamoru, the sale of the Haleta books from the Guam Museum. And a lot of you came down and purchased them. We're continuing that sale. All of the Haleta books and dictionaries published by the Department of Chamorro Affairs are just $10. And so Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., please come down to the Guam Museum. We have some of the books on display downstairs in the lobby. Books can be shipped off island, but you need to make sure that you call us here or contact Patty Hernandez. Her email is down there. But reach out, because for an extra fee, you can ship your books off island, but put for buat mga malefa, cash, check, money order only are accepted. No PayPal, no credit cards. All right. Okay, I am excited. I'm very excited for today. And so let's get right into this. Number one. So remember, Faisen I Guam Museum features questions that come from the community. So every month I solicit questions, I collect questions. These questions come from people who stop by the Guam Museum. These questions come from people who message, who email, who follow the Guam Museum on social media. I teach free Chamorro language classes. Sometimes these questions come from those students. But because there had been such an interest in Chamorro music, I decided let's do one which is focused entirely on the questions that I've gotten about Chamorro music. And so, Iminahatsa, the first one. I love the song "En Gumupu Si Paluma" by Johnny Sablan. But when I listened to it, oh, there's a typo dispenser, with my grandmother, she said the words are different than she remembered. Why is that? This is something that actually happens quite frequently for these types of songs. And part of it is because of the transition from traditional Chamorro music, which we'll talk about in a second, to Chamorro music as we know it nowadays, where it's largely recorded, written down. This is a change from the past, where Chamorro music was highly improvised, spontaneous. But first off, if you're not familiar with what the question is asking, let's listen in to Johnny Sablan's version of "En Gumupu Si Paluma."
En gumupu si paluma, jatumogi tronkundoni, asangani zu paluma, nabonita pavaikoni. En gumupu si paluma, jatumogi tanantanga, uhahasu itanohu. Itanohu wahan, an kumati si paluma, pues triste si neni, ay paluma manuatu, zabay tuk si neni, an kumanta si paluma, lalam langi adaw. Zaman Flores alam tanu, zaman magufi tau-tau. tomogi drunken soda Antaguzu biospia Itsumoru siana paluma I paluma no izu papa Zatahi hita gumupu Zatahi hita kumata
Ay, bonito na kanta na go, bonito na kanta. That is a beautiful song. For me, it has a lot of memories for me because when I was first learning to speak the Chamorro language from my grandmother, this was one of the first songs that I sat down with her listening to the CD, Chamorro by Johnny Sablan, and asked her to help me write down, transcribe, and translate the words. And so for many people today, the Angumupu Si Paluma is this version of the song from Johnny Sablan. And so here are the lyrics for you. And so if you can't understand the Chamorro, of course, the song describes a Chamorro when it is flying and sort of as it moves its way around the jungle, it stops in different trees, the doni tree, the tongan tree, the tsotda, and then the singer is describing things that are happening, but you get the sense, of course, that there's deeper metaphors. So there's also perhaps somebody there's a love interest involved, and so the bird is telling the singer that he's gonna find sort of a real love out there. At the end, though, sort of Johnny Sablan's version delves into a little bit of nationalism, a little bit of Chamorro pride and empowerment at the end, because the singer then is told by the bird to go and seek out the other Chamorro birds. And then it ends with I paluma na izuan papa zatahihita gumupu zatahihita kumanta, which means, oh bird, give me a wing, and then we will fly together and we will sing together. Right? And so it's a very beautiful song, very beautiful song. And so some people today argue, of course, that Johnny Sablan wrote the song, and Johnny Sablan did, write the lyrics for this song for the most part. But Johnny Sablan is very important in the history of Chamorro music as somebody who released a lot of records, recorded a lot of songs, made possibilities for other people. But he also helped the transition from Chamorro music in the past, the traditional form, to Chamorro music as we've known it for the past 50 years. And so what do I mean by this? Chamorro music before, there were songs that were written down. A lot of these songs were Spanish influenced songs that Chamorros sang, but largely most of the singing that Chamorros did was what we call today Cantan Samarita. And Cantan Samarita is improvised singing, collective group singing, and it's often characterized by adzotti or adagao, in which you throw verses back and forth to each other, in which somebody starts a song and somebody else takes the next verse, and then they can sing back to each other. They can tease each other, they can fall in love together, they can just tell a story, but it is largely made up using familiar tunes, but also, some of them are simple and silly, some of them are beautiful and poetic. The Guam Council on the Arts and Humanities, CAHA, has recognized a number of people as Cantan Samarita singers, masters of culture for what they've done. And here is a poster of them that you may have seen around the island. We lost one of them. There's only Ben Meno out of them who is still alive, and we lost Tan Florin Palino, who was also part of that group. She passed away recently. And so Cantan Samarita is hard because people would make up the songs. There would be verses that people would remember that they really liked, that they might repeat, but that wouldn't stop somebody else from making up their own verses to the song. So for example, these are two examples of Chamorita verses here on the right that have been documented. And This is when a chamorita is sung between two groups, one lalahi, men, y otro, famalawan on the other side, and then they make fun of each other and they sing verses teasing each other. So the lyrics are, Ai champan manutera, oh, the time of young women. Men sinina gaga, when they wear sort of blouses that are red, matan halbumensi, or matan niho halbumensi, their eyes or their face convinces you, patsot niha halfumagaga, that their mouth is what fools you, or what doesn't treat you with respect, fagaga. And then, what's it called? The girls sing back, ay na champon manuteru, oh, in the age of young men. Mankinatsusunes kaki, when they're wearing their khaki pants, matania halbumensi, their face or their eyes convince you, patsodniha how dumagi, but their mouth is what lies to you. Right? And so these might be two verses that start, or another person jumping in might just take the first line, ay nachampon maniotera, and then maybe the second line they might talk about a different item of clothing that they're wearing, and then they might continue it by talking about the eyes and the face and the mouth. But ultimately, whoever's singing is empowered to kind of come up with something themselves, express their own creativity, express their own humor. And so this is a video that's posted on Guampedia. It features master storyteller Clotilde Gould talking about the Cantan Chamorita.
Chamorita is a traditional song in the Chamorro culture, and usually it occurs during a thatching roof preparation. As you can see in this environment, the frame of that building is being prepared while the ladies and sometimes men also weave either the napa or the palm fronds in preparation for the thatching party. In the meantime, while this is going on, it's considered a real social thing more than work. So what they do is they sing, and I guess through boredom in the past, what they've done is they sing, or different individuals who are talented in the what they call chamorita communicate. Chamorita is a song, and it's traditional. It's usually a song of mockery or a song of challenge, where two individuals communicate to each other. Either they insult each other, or they compete who has the best fishing skills, or whatever that they want to engage to. It could be a competition with a boyfriend and insulting each other back and forth. It's spontaneous. It's usually 4 lines, the second and the fourth having to rhyme. And it's really very difficult for just anyone to do such a thing, being that you have to rhyme it, plus the fact that you have to come back with the answer to the challenge that is being thrown at you.
Biba. And so most Chamorro songs were of this type before World War II, and possibly going back millennia. Creatives created, rather than focusing on the memorizing or the representing of a song as a fixed static thing. The point, though, was to take tunes that everyone is familiar with and to find your own voice, your own expression, your own creativity using that. So this didn't mean that like Chamorros were always making new tunes and so on, but if there was a tune that people knew and they liked, you could start it in that tune, and it was easy for the other person to jump in and express themselves. And so Angumupusi Paluma is a Cantan Chamorita tune. And so in the Journal of American Folklore in 1949, 2 researchers talked about Chamorro songs, or they called them Guamanian songs, because at that time, Chamorros had started to call themselves Guamanians. And so you can see here that they met with, so they called it Gumupusi Paluma, as sung by Remedios Leon Guerrero Perez, Miss Julita Manabusa, Miss Maria Ulloa Camacho, and others. Right, and so you can see here that their description Many of the Guamanian teachers claim that this is the only true Guamanian folk song handed down from olden times. This tune is part of everyone's vocabulary and is the one most often used for improvised verses. It is often sung by fishing parties at night, by roofing parties weaving coconut palms for the roof of a house, or by a couple expressing their love or annoyance with each other. Harmony parts are usually improvised and the verses often sung by alternate groups or individuals. And so Angumupusi Paluma before the war and even after the war was not a song that sort of like the way we think of a song nowadays. It was like a vessel. It was a musical vessel. It was a tune that was simple. It was pretty slow moving. There are chamarita tunes that move much faster, but because it was slow, everybody had their own way of singing it and using it to express themselves, right? But it would oftentimes begin with the idea of a bird flying through the jungle and landing on a tree, and from there you build up your point. Are you going to tease somebody? Are you going to express love to somebody? Are you just going to tell a story? Are you going to say silly things that sound fun, right? Because one of the great things about the Chamarita was that at a time when religious pressures, Chamorro culture could be very oppressive about expressing things like sexual identity or attraction to somebody else. You weren't allowed to date in those days, right? You were, especially young women, were strictly monitored. Singing songs was a way of expressing things because you could use metaphors to talk about it. So, for example, as the idea of the bird flying through the forest, if you ask some people about it, what does it mean, the bird flying through the forest? If you used it, if you told the song, if you used the song in a certain way, the bird flying through the forest or the jungle and standing on trees was actually sexual innuendo, of course, because bird and then tree branches and then the bird flying. It was, anyways, I won't go any more into detail about that, but hopefully your imaginations can fill in the gaps. And so, for example, here is another version of Angumupusi Paluma that was documented. And so you'll see that at the beginning, it's the same as what Johnny Sablan sort of wrote down. Angumupusi Paluma, Zatumogi Gichonkundoni, Zahatagu Zusinana, Na Ibonita by Hukoni, right? And so similar, but then of course, slight difference at the end, right? So Johnny Sablan's version, it's a bird that's talking, it's a bird that's communicating to the singer. But in this one, the bird represents something else, and then you talk about your mom, right? The second verse, and Gumupusi Paluma ti hatumu manutinya, Zatumogi Gitronkun Hadzu, Zahakonsuela Ipinitihu. Right? So here, the bird flying through the jungle is about healing somebody's pain. They don't know where the bird ends up, but when it lands, it makes the singer feel better, right? This person is this verse probably comes from somebody who's dealing with a broken heart or unrequited love. And Gumupusi Paluma Zat Tumogi Gitronkun Pai Pai, and Li'i Magi Likau Dimo Papa Zawun Fanaita. Right? So very different than the Johnny Sablan version. And note that the trees, when you talk to enough elders who grew up hearing the song and singing it, people had their favorite trees that they liked to sing about. So in Johnny Sablan's version, of course, it's the Tronkun Doni, Tronkun Sotda, Tongan Tongan. But I remember when I would ask elders during oral history research about that, they would laugh, Tongan Tongan. No one would sing about the Tongan Tongan. Because what are you saying what are you saying about what you're talking about if you're referencing the Tongan Tongan? Right? That the tree that you would pick would actually, it might be connected to the metaphor that you were implying or creating, right? So if it's Ifit, are you portraying strength? If it's Pai Pai, if it's Ilang Ilang, is it fragrant? Is it beautiful? Is it lovely? Right? And so what Johnny Sablan did though, and I'm always happy, I love talking about sort of Johnny Sablan's experience because he went from being very disconnected to a lot of these things, pursuing a career in music where he would just sing in English, but then feeling like he needed to know more about his roots, his identity, where he comes from, that he didn't, and as a singer, it bothered him that he didn't know the songs of his own people. And so he learned Kantan Chambarita songs from other people, people like Clotilde Gould, his uncle Greg Guevara, for example, that he learned songs from them and other elders. He talked to a lot of old people, wrote down the songs, got the tunes. And then what he did is he recorded them. And you can't record the fluidity, the spontaneity, the creativity, the living nature of the Chamarita song. But what he did is he nonetheless captured it for future generations so that they can hear it. And so that's one of the big importances of somebody like Johnny Sablan, is being that bridge between where sort of the way that Chamorro sang, as fewer and fewer people were able to speak Chamorro, there was more anti-Chamorro language policies out there, a greater desire to Americanize. Johnny Sablan helped take the past and repurpose it, adapt it, evolve it so that Chamorro music could still persist. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful that we still keep this song together, that we still sing this song, we still know this song, and that it didn't disappear. All right. All right. Do we have any idea which Chamorro artist has sold the most albums? This is an important question. Now, unfortunately, there aren't as many Chamorros out there who are recording albums nowadays, right? Because the time of CDs, cassettes, vinyl records, we're kind of moving out of that time, right? Now you make digital downloads. And unfortunately, a lot of the established musicians, they don't see there being as much of an interest in recording music. There's still some interest in performing, right? You can still get compensated to perform Chamorro music, but making albums, recording like a full, complete album, there's not as much support or interest for that anymore. But there are some younger people like who are recording in Chamorro, and you can download it on things like Bandcamp. You can hear it on Spotify. I do wanna, what's it called? Malagudunan Befata, like people like Microchild, Joe Garrido, even Andrew Gumatauto and Patrick Palomo with Trade Winds, which also includes Microchild. Sort of, you have some artists who are recording in Chamorro, and we should definitely support them. But when we're talking about who has sold the most, though, we need to go a little bit further back in time. And so here might be some people that might be in the running for it, right? Johnny Sablan recorded, I can't even remember, I believe 15 albums total. Sort of the pioneer who helped start the contemporary Chamorro music industry, released Dalangani, the first Chamorro album in 1968. Or Gus and Doll. Gus and Doll had definitely, I think, 12 albums total. They both came from singing families. Doll is, of course, the sister of Johnny Sablan. Gus Kitsutsu, a lot of musicians in his family. They recorded a lot of albums. They've got vinyl, they've got cassettes, some CDs, and so they might be in the running for it. J.D. Crutch, we'll be talking about him a little bit in a second. J.D. Crutch, of course, recorded a lot, has a lot of albums out there, famous for songs, from Mariano's Homegrown, Benti Unuzuki Presu. Gwenaifan Monglu was an amazing album. I mean, he's possibly in the running. And I do also want to say Casey Leon Guerrero. Casey Leon Guerrero definitely helped define sort of the sound of Chamorro music in the 80s and 90s. And then Bobby DeGracia, somebody who's still sort of out there performing music. She's got a lot of stuff out there. It's actually none of these people, though, if you could guess. If you could guess, there's somebody who's very important and very visible and audible for Chamorro music who is, of course, not listed here. And you might know who we are thinking of. We are, of course, thinking of Jimmy D. Jimmy D. James Pangilinan Flores. And so, or Jimmy D went by a lot of different names. They called him, of course, the Guam Don Ho, the Chamorro Don Ho. They called him Chamorro Elvis because of his style and his approach. But he was an important, highly influential Chamorro musician. He got started young. You know, this is one of the reasons why I love talking about Chamorro music. Is Jimmy D was part of that post-war generation of Chamorros who, you know, it was easier to get musical instruments on the island. They were hearing sort of music coming in on the radio, some on TV, hearing it more in movies. They were excited about the new opportunities for music, and there was chances. There was new gatherings that you could play at. Unfortunately, you know, most of the clubs at that time, the bars catered to the military, not locals. So, you know, no one was really very few people in like the 50s and 60s were interested in listening to Chamorro music. But Jimmy D was part of that generation where sort of those who are musically inclined, you know, they always had places to perform. They always had people to sing to. There was so much of an interest in that. But they didn't sing in Chamorro. They sang in English. They wrote English songs. They did English covers. But eventually in the 1970s, he started to record in Chamorro, especially after, you know, Johnny Sablon, the Chatfirst brothers had basically started the Chamorro recording industry. He opened his own recording studio. He also purchased the rights of music from other artists. And so he was definitely, and so it's hard to track who is the best selling, but this piece of trivia comes from the Guam Business News, who in the early 2000s sort of did an investigation, a poll. They went around sort of asking people in the industry, asking artists, musicians, places where music was sold at that time, to ask, you know, who has sold the most, whose stuff moves the fastest, who gets bought the most. And Jimmy D, according to the Guam Business News, is said to have sold over 1 million albums, vinyl, CDs, cassettes. Probably you could put 8-track in there if you wanted to, but over 1 million. And so one of the interesting things, though, of course, is that Jimmy D was well known for his chamaritas and his sunset dinner shows. And a lot of his albums, at least according to the Guam Business News, were purchased by Japanese tourists who, as part of their experience, sort of would pick up one of his albums to take back with them as a souvenir of their time in Guam. And that's one reason why he ended up selling possibly more than any other artist. Now, Jimmy D did pass away. He passed away last year. You know, he was, and the island, the global Guam, the global Chamorro community mourned him. And so, you know, as somebody who did a lot to promote Chamorro music, a lot to sort of create the mainstream for it, Usaga Gimenagum. And so I do want to, so Jimmy D, some people that I know, of course, feel that Jimmy D's music wasn't particularly Chamorro, you know, because he had a nightclub Las Vegas flair to it. He was sort of emulating Elvis and others. And so, but, you know, for some people, like I remember, you know, like my grandparents really loved Jimmy D's music. Like, you know, they loved his style and his sound. And so, I don't think, and so some people will say that his music wasn't super Chamorro. I definitely disagree with that. He recorded a lot of songs, and he even followed the lead of others, recording traditional songs, giving a new spin on them. And so I do want to share a little bit of his music, give him some time to sort of speak for himself.
I'm proud to have written, I'm proud to have recorded, and I want to sing it for you all. Maestro, I am a proud Chamorro. Banido Suzu, that's Chamorro. I take my music, my culture, all over the world, ladies and gentlemen. I don't just say it, I do it. proud of my customs and culture. I'm proud that Guam is my home. I'm proud that I am CHamoru. No matter where I may roam, I stand tall and say I'm CHamoru. And I'm proud that Guam is my home. My home is a beautiful island, a gem in a vast open sea. God must have loved this small island. He gave it great charm and beauty. Be proud if you are CHamoru. No matter how near or how far, stand tall and say you're CHamoru. Be proud, for that's what you are. Unggan magayit panidosuzu na CHamoru. Panidosuzu ni kantaku. Panidosuzu ni kultura, ni lingwahe, sa ni costumbrin ni CHamoru. Around the world I may wander, seeking my fortune and fame. But no matter where all this may lead me, my heart isn't wrong just the same. Tonight, CHamoru. Banidosuzu ni kantaku. Banidosuzu nui kultura. Ni costumbrin i CHamoru. Famantafan, I am a proud CHamoru. Proud of my music and song, proud of my customs and culture, and proud that Guam is my home. Thank you all very much, ladies and gentlemen. It was such a big hit for me. I appreciate it. Don Kuno na Jesus Mahasi todos.
Hey, Biba Biba. Biba Biba. And from Jimmy D, you know, and we moved to JD Crutch. But I do want to sort of to mention before we move on, though, that what I really liked about the message of that song, though, is that sometimes when we talk about Chamorro culture and Chamorro pride, some people who feel very strongly or speak very forcefully may have a very narrow idea of what it means to be Chamorro. And one thing that Jimmy D is a reminder of, though, is sort of that you don't, is that sort of you have to be more open with your idea about what, makes a Chamorro, especially nowadays when we think about how the experiences that my grandparents had for being Chamorro. Most people don't live on ranches or grow up on ranches anymore. And so most people live in air-conditioned houses or apartments. The majority of the Chamorro people don't live in the Marianas Islands anymore. The majority of the Chamorro people don't speak Chamorro anymore. And so the openness is important, because if you don't want to articulate your pride in a way in which actually the majority of your own people get excluded from it. Because if you want those people to speak Chamorro, then you need to encourage them. You need to invite them. You need to welcome them to join. instead of sort of making them feel bad because they weren't taught the language. But anyways, we move on now to si J.D. Crutch. Minatulo na Fanaisan. J.D. Crutch is by far my favorite Chamorro musician. What can you tell me about his early days? Well, I'm sure that some people watching have great stories about J.D. Crutch from his early days. He did seem to be a very colorful character. But let's go to a couple different sources to talk about J.D. Crutch and his impact on Chamorro music. And so first, though, let's listen to J.D. Crutch himself. Diba? Oh yeah, Zahui Bosnia. That was something that was very distinct about J.D. Crutch. And so is that many, many defining Chamorro singers, especially of the 70s, there was an effort, of course, to sound more melodious, sort of in a Western sense. And then one thing that J.D. Crutch did is he was definitely melodious, but he also sort of just embraced the way that sort of like a Chamorro sounds. Like a Chamorro, from the ranch, Chamorro from the island sounds, not to try to sort of clean up the pronunciation or smooth it over, but just to kind of give it in a more raw, real way. And so Uncle Tote, Joe Cunningham, of course, worked very closely with JD during his life, and he wrote an article about JD Crutch on Guampedia. And so he talks about sort of the origins of JD Crutch. He says, days working at the ranch were arduous, but punctuated by the joyful sounds of Cantan Samorita, or Chamorita, an ancient call and response style of singing. True Chamorita is basically a musical and verbal shootout, with each singer trying to outgun each other with clever and sometimes naughty one-upmanship, being blessed with both a sharp mind and a piercingly haunting voice. Dueñas was a natural. And so remember the Canton Samarita, sort of that we talked about before. Sort of J.D. Crutch grew up in that, grew up on ranches, grew up in the farming life, and then sort of where you pass the time by singing to each other, by making up songs yourself, by singing with those around you. And as Chamorros had done for thousands of years, something even the Spanish recognized, J.D. Crutch sang wherever he went. And this was something that Chamorros did for the longest time. And different colonizers to the island recognized that wherever Chamorros go, they're always singing. They're always making up a song. They're always singing with others. And so Uncle Tote writes, and sing he did, anytime, anywhere. Sometimes he would even erupt in song in a crowded movie theater, causing both amusement and consternation in the audience. J.D. was indulging his passion, unwilling ears notwithstanding. His enormous charisma usually got him off the hook. And so, yes, it was even, I remember reading something about that in the 70s when they were promoting his first album. And if you ever heard anyone sort of tuning their guitar and singing in the movie theater before the movie started, it was probably J.D. Crutch. And if you even heard people singing during the movie, it might have been J.D. Crutch. And so note that he sort of came from that organic, spontaneous background of Chamorro music. And so J.D. Crutch, so one of the first places that he really sort of started to formally, at least officially, sort of represent himself or debut himself was at GW High School. And so Robert Underwood writes in his article, Jess Mint, he writes about sort of the first ever Chamorro Week event that they had at GW in February of 1974. And he says in 72, okay, I started to teach Guam history and began to revise the perspective of the classes previously taught. As young teachers, Elaine Cadigan and I started Chamorro Week at GW in 1974. We did the first Chamorro Spanish battle reenactment with ROTC cadets in which we let the Chamorros win. We taught the teachers how to sing Chamorro songs, and they called themselves the Hallelujah Chorus. And then he says a young student singer named Joseph Duenas, J.D. Crutch, brought the house down for the first time in his life at a student assembly. And Underwood goes on to remark that, one of the things that was amazing was that he had never seen young people, teenagers, respond to Chamorro music the way that they responded to J.D. Crutch's Chamorro music. So if you brought a bunch of 15, 16-year-olds in the early 70s together to listen to music, and it was like Chamorro music, a lot of them wouldn't care. They wouldn't be interested. But J.D. Crutch's approach, which was kind of country, which was very rock, which was very raw and hard compared to a lot of the other groups, like the Chatford Brothers, the Delgado Brothers, Jimmy D, Johnny Sablon. It was much more sort of urban, and it was something that they identified with. And so sort of Underwood remarked once that he was amazed seeing the kids sort of respond to J.D. Crutch's music in excited ways because they had never seen young people respond to Chamorro music like that. And so Dr. Michael Clement from the University of Guam, in his dissertation, he writes about this. He says, J.D. Crutch arrived on the music scene at the exact time when youths who had grown up disconnected from Chamorro culture were looking for an identity. During the early 1970s, when the songs of the Chatford Brothers, Johnny Sablon, and the Delgado Brothers played on the radio, J.D. Crutch noticed his peers would change the station. He recalled, that kind of got me to start. I wondered if I just changed the way Chamorro songs are, maybe if they don't understand the words, at least they can like the music. His motivation was matched by his clear, powerful voice described by Tote Cunningham as a mystic blend of Rod Stewart raunch and the nasal sound of the Chamorro Tetsas. And so this is what made J.D. Crutch very important. We talked about how Johnny Sablon was important in terms of, taking Chamorro music from its organic sort of grassroots, free-flowing style, and then bring it into recorded music in which you make albums, in which you sort of go into the recording studio and you put it out in a static form that can travel over airwaves, travel in people's suitcases when they leave the island. can be re-listened to in their homes at their leisure. But J.D. Crutch offered something different, because Johnny Sablon and others were very much, a lot of the older people were very interested in that music. But for the youth who had grown up after the war, they didn't really like that as much. It didn't speak to their sensibilities because it was part of a past that they associated with their grandparents, with before. It wasn't their life. And so this is J.D. Crutch's sort of brilliance, is making it so that Chamorro music could evolve in another way, so that it wasn't sort of the Spanish style ballads or sort of the poppy sensibilities that other musicians were doing, but it could be rock inspired. And it didn't have to be so polished. It could be a little bit rougher around the edges. And that was also something that was Chamorro too. And so giving voice to that post-war generation, that was what was so important, was that things were changing dramatically. And J.D. Crutch offered a very different way of staying rooted and changing at the same time. And that's the beauty, that's the thing that we should remember nowadays when we think about the next steps for Chamorro music. Chamorro music has been so essential in helping keep the Chamorro language alive. Even if you don't speak Chamorro, as the majority of Chamorros do not speak Chamorro, chances are good you are familiar with Chamorro music. You feel it in a certain way. You may know some words because of Chamorro music. We need to keep that going. We need more musicians recording in Chamorro music because it's even harder. Back in the 70s, somebody like Johnny Sablon wasn't fluent in Chamorro, but he pushed himself to become fluent so that he could record in Chamorro. It's even more difficult for young musicians nowadays because they may not have much fluency at all. And so we need to support our young artists. If you have a grandson or a granddaughter, or if you have a cousin who's into music, help them, encourage them. If you speak Chamorro, offer to translate a song for them into Chamorro, offer to work with them to write a Chamorro song. And I always offer this. I have an open invitation that if anyone would like a song translated into Chamorro, it may take me a little while depending on how busy I am, but I am always willing for free to help Chamorro musicians if they want to record Chamorro music, to at least come up with a translation for you so that you can just go ahead and do it. Because I want there to be more Chamorro music. I worry because in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, there was Chamorro musicians who were jumping in, sometimes just recording a single album, sometimes recording a couple albums. But nowadays, we don't have as many making new music, which means we have to encourage people to keep making. We need to support our youth who may not feel comfortable in the language, who may feel disconnected from it. We need to help connect them to it. We need to give them that support. Okay, our final question for today. Can you tell me some background on the Belembao Tudzan? Oh my goodness, another typo, Belembao Tudzan. It is not Belembao Udzan. And so let's take a step back. During the Spanish period, musical instruments come into Guam. Like the guitar comes in, the piano comes in. I mean, there was even sometimes some violins, some other instruments like that on the island. But one of the most fascinating instruments which Chamorros adapted quickly for themselves was the Belembao Tudzan. And we don't know exactly how it came in. It is an instrument that has roots elsewhere in the world, but it could have been brought in by the Spaniards. It could have been brought in by just whalers, people visiting. We don't know. But during the Spanish period, the Belembao Tudzan comes into the island, and Chamorros quickly adopt it and make it a part of their culture. And so this picture is from more than 100 years ago here on Guam. And you'll note that this is a party, everyone lining up. Look at these two. Are these two getting ready for the electric slide? There was no electricity on the island back then. So I don't know what you would call this, the coconut lamp slide instead. Sa Tod's Electricidad. But you can see here, there's a guy here with a violin, a guitar, and here is somebody with a belembatudzan in his lap. And so before the war, belembatudzans were almost always featured at parties. One of the important things, oh wait, hold on. One of the most important things that made the belembatudzan a regular feature is that unlike a guitar where you couldn't really make them locally, you had to buy them from off island, or you had to buy them from somebody who had brought them from off island. The belembatudzan could easily be made using local materials. So there's the gourd, which goes on your stomach, and then there's the sort of the I forgot what it's called, but the long sort of stick, which you stretch the string across. And before, the string would be made with things like pineapple fiber. When wire started to come in more frequently, CHamoros would use wire to make the string, and then you just have a bow to kind of tap it. You use your body sort of as like the speaker for the sound. And these are pictures. This was actually in, for a little Guam Museum history. This woodcut right here was actually from something featured in a magazine from off island, where Agata Johnston, who also this is her belembatudzan. This actually might be the one from the Guam Museum, where they were encouraging people that if you visit Guam, come to the Guam Museum, and one of the things that you can see is this ancient instrument. But this dude's hardcore. After that, Susuni Kamsu, he's playing the belembatudzan on the Kamsu. This guy has almost got like super Chamorro bingo going on. All he needs is what else does he need? And then he will be the complete Chamorro master. But as I said, the belembatudzan comes from other places. You can find it around the world. It has roots in Africa. It's a very important part in Brazil, but you can find it all over the place. And some people say that it may have traveled with enslaved Africans, that they have brought the knowledge of how to make it, and then it just kept going, and different cultures sort of took it and made it their own in different ways. So if you're familiar with the fighting style capoeira, the birimbau is used for the capoeira.
Hi, my name is Roberto Tapia for Capoeira Sul da Bahia, Monitor Bucho. Today I'm going to show you how to play capoeira. Now I'm going to show you how to play birimbau. Birimbau is the most important instrument in the capoeira. And also, capoeira is not capoeira if we don't have music. So, birimbau is first a gourd, a basic gourd, a normal gourd, a stick, big stick, very flexible stick. This stick is from Brazil, it's called biriba. And also, we need a wire. We need a stick, this little stick, and also we need a cachichi. This is called cachichi. And a stone, normal stone. So, for playing the birimbau, put your pinky on the cord, below the cord, and these two fingers hold the stick, and the thumb and index hold the stone, like this. Later, make sure to put it here in the stomach. So, I'm going to show you how to play first. So, the birimbau, you play basically with no stone here. Second, put your stone in the wire and press. And third, just put your stone, but don't press a lot, just like this. Can you hear the difference between letter and letter? So, now we're going to combine. that's how we play berimbau. Now I'm going to...
And so from Brazil now, you can recognize the similarities to the bela batuta as it's made and used on Guam, but you can also see key differences. And so on the right here, this is Jesus Crisostomo Meno, or wait, who was the Jesus Meno Crisostomo, who is the only recognized Chamorro master for the bela batuta. He's from the village of Inarajan. There was something about the village of Inarajan that it did have lots of bela batuta makers. Somebody who was very well known for playing the bela batuta is the former commissioner of Inarajan. He's here in the middle. This is Enrique Naputi. And so the bela batuta was a regular fixture, but eventually, of course, musical styles changed, musical tastes changed. Fewer and fewer people were playing the bela batuta, fewer people were making the bela batuta. And so it's kind of disappeared in many ways. There were some Chamorro musicians who did record it. Maria Yatar McDonald used it for her album and for some of her songs quite a while ago. But for the most part, there was a huge decline in the use and the playing of the bela batuta. Now, when FESPAC came to Guam in 2016, there was a resurgence. There was a resurgence of interest in that, and a whole number of people were taught how to make the bela batuta and were taught how to play the bela batuta. And so I wanted to share a little bit of that, sort of, when we think about sort of the future of this instrument.
Buenas on Hafaday. Behind me is the famous Lujan House, one of the few existing pre-World War II homes on Guam.
And we have been invited here to learn about an important ancient instrument called the bela batuta.
Now, not only are we going to learn the history behind the bela batuta, we're going to learn to play the instrument, and we're going to find out how the music behind the instrument has been passed on from generation to generation.
What made you interested to actually learn how to make this and play it? And who taught you?
It wasn't until when I was in college that I heard there was even a program, but it was through the CAHA, Culture, Arts and Humanities. And so one of the, we had a guest speaker come to our class, and she talked about, it was Judy, and she talked about the folk arts program and trying to preserve a lot of the traditional arts. I called her up and I said, now I'm interested in the bela batuta. Is there anybody? Or she said that there was still somebody around, and he was the last one at that time. He was still the last one.
How was it working under Master Crisostomo?
He was really nice. I really enjoyed him. This was like 20 years ago. This is 1992 when I was really young. So he was very patient. He was very generous with his knowledge. All the years, he experimented with the size, the chord, the length, and whatever materials were around until he came up with his own version of what he likes. He started out with an interest, and then I said, oh, okay. And then once people said, oh, you're the one, you're learning from Tunisia? I said, yeah. They said, hey, can you come to my class and demonstrate, in the school? So I started doing that. And then the teacher says, can you teach me can you make me one? And I say, I'd rather show you, or let's do it together. I prefer passing it that way where I actually teach them because, then it gets even further, right? Is a gourd. These are not the local gourds. These are gourds that we just ordered. What we're going to do is we're going to take one of your gourds, right? You're going to look for the widest part, and that's where you're going to make the cut for the bottom part. Okay. And then find a narrow part also where you're gonna place here, with a knife or a blade, make curves around it so that it can rest nicely on it.
You want to teach me though? Because let's face it, I don't even know how to.
I've never done
So
this.
just
Gauge the length with your finger,
okay.
and then just spin the board.
See, if I could do this, you guys could do this.
So here's me trying. You see this? I started out with full intention and I ended up curled down here.
Yeah, well, it also has to do with that shape. But once I pick the spot and I start hacking away,
You'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out. So we just got to find a happy medium.
This is not just hey, you cut a piece of stick out, tie a string. Everything has a reason for it. When I first heard this, when we walked in, we first initially heard it, I thought, wow, that has almost a harmonic sound like a didgeridoo does. Now, the bigger the gourd, the different the sound.
Right.
When you're, really making your own instrument, right? You're really meditating, and you really have that sense of really trying to, preserve history and tradition. This is that one piece of wood, right? It came from a tree, a branch, and it came from a banalo tree. Nowadays, banalo is not, it's not as abundant around the island anymore because it usually grows around coastal areas or along river banks. So we use pagu wood, and that's a wild hibiscus, right? Which is like found anywhere. And then this wire, one string came from the steel bands of a tire.
Belted wire.
That's the good thing about it. At least you get 5 out of it.
Of one tire.
It's like a guitar, but it's more percussive because you're going to use a stick. And then you strike just on either side of the... And they only make very slight changes, right? And so these frets here come up by this opposite of the guitar.
Very, very interesting. You know what I like about it? That I'm left-handed, so it was very challenging to learn to play guitar. This is one of the first ambidextrous natural instruments I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, no, sure.
This is neat. I love it.
Balambao means like rumbling or vibration. Tuzen is your tummy. So balambao tuzen.
Balambatuzen, bumbling stomach.
That is so much fun. And I have to say, one of the best parts of our visit is meeting all the talented musicians who are committed to preserving our Chamorro culture.
For more information on the Balambatuzen, or for class information, call Kaha at 300-1204-8. I'm Lieutenant Commander Ed Casas.
Zanguahusi Kalingsa Nicholas Perez. Girin Hamini Joint Region Marianas Public Affairs. Donkluna Suzuas Maasi. Adios, Guahan.
That's the key.
Biba, biba, biba. And so I definitely challenge anyone out there, if you are, incorporate the Balambatuzen. We don't hear the Balambatuzen enough in our music nowadays, but I would love to hear more Balambatuzen. I think there's a lot of cool things that can be done with it. And so, Enoha para Paugo, that is it for today. This has been a special late mess Chamorro edition of Faisen I Guam Museum. And I hope everything went well today in terms of our live streaming. We were live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube and hopefully on Twitter. And so once we are done here, I'm going to check to make sure that all the live streams went through. But yes, por favor, remember, for future editions of Faisen I Guam Museum, these questions come from all of you. And so you can email me your questions. You can message the Guam Museum on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Or you can message me personally on Facebook, as many of you do. But yeah, get us your questions, because this is one of my joys, being the curator at the Guam Museum, is to be able to share the knowledge that has been collected, the information that we've already put together about the past, the present, and so on, and then just find ways to get it out to the community. And so, si Diyos masin, no hamsu todos, adios, este ki manat lihi talo.